aspect of that relates to the validity of the vote that was taken. And there are, under Robert's rules, a series of ways in which one can challenge something like that. One is by what is commonly referred to as a motion for reconsideration. That, however, with respect to the vote that was taken, must be done on the day in question. In addition to that, under Robert's rules, a motion for reconsideration is not appropriate in those circumstances where an individual is elected to a position, such as we were doing on that evening. So it is my opinion, and I recognize some folks, and I respect their view, disagree with that. But my opinion is a motion for reconsideration would not now be appropriate, nor would it have then been appropriate because of the nature of the election. The second process which one sees and which can be pursued on occasion is what is commonly referred to as a motion to rescind. It's one of the two motions that talk about taking back, reversing, changing what one has done. However, it is also my opinion that a motion to rescind would not have been appropriate because, once again, Robert's Rules talks in great detail about those scenarios in which a motion to rescind is not appropriate. And a motion to rescind is not appropriate, once again, when you're talking about the choice, the selection, the election of an individual who is present, who accepts it, and proceeds accordingly. Consequently, Mr. Moderator, it is my opinion that, although controversial, the vote that was taken was handled correctly. There was not a violation of the rules. The ability to break a tie was, in fact, appropriate and valid in those situations, or in that situation, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that now brings us to the call for tonight's evening. No, excuse me, we are proceeding with our business. I am not recognizing you, Mr. von Keyserling. What is the violation of our rules that is currently persisting?
Well, the town's attorney has explained that...
Please state your point of order, which is a claim that there is a violation of our rules currently occurring.
Since Robert's Rules pertains in the situations that town's attorney has explained, and you have too, there is a misstatement and a misapplication of Robert's Rules.
Okay, you no longer have the floor. This is a point of debate. You do not have the floor to debate. We will continue with the meeting. I notified, excuse me, Mr. von Keyserling, you do not have the floor, so do not speak any further. All right. The moderator notified our district and committee chairs that he would place on our consent calendar a total of 6 items. Those are items 2, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And in a moment, I will proceed to do that. The moderator also, and this was based on the reports of the districts that sent in their recommendations for organization of our calendar, that the combined calendar would consist of the following items: 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 22, 23, and 25, which would leave to be considered separately items 1, 4, 5, 10, 11, 14, and 24. Now, in the interim, in response to that email that went out to the district and committee chairs, a question was raised as to item 10 and the reason for it being on the separate list. And that was because District 7 had requested that placement. And District 7, through its chair, has informed me now that it does not object to item 10 being combined rather than being considered separately. So what I will suggest for our agenda tonight is to combine items 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 22, 23, and 25 for voting purposes. I will place items 2, 17 through 21 on our consent calendar, which would leave items 1, 4, 5, 11, 14, and 24 to be considered separately. Now, let me inform all who are interested in the cell tower issue, which is item number 11. There are speaker sign-up lists, and there are 2 separate lists for that particular item. Anticipating a motion to amend item 11 to be offered by our Land Use Committee, there is a separate sheet for the amendment. And if you are in favor of the amendment, which is to add the Pine Needham location to a ban for cell towers, if you want to speak on that amendment and are in favor of it, I ask that you can preserve a spot in the discussion by putting your name on that particular list. And the other sheet is just in general for item 11 offered by District 12, the sense of the meeting resolution, seeking a sense of the meeting resolution expressing a wish that towers not be placed within a certain distance of accredited schools. So any interested speaker, I encourage you to put your name on that list if you want to try and ensure your ability to address us tonight. There is one of each sheet in front, and there are 2 copies of each on the first table that you come to outside the auditorium. I'm sorry, it would be as you walk out of the auditorium, it would be the second table closest to the doors. All right, so at this time, yes, Mr. Dane.
You mentioned 17 through 21. Nowhere do I see anything about 15 and 16. Am I missing something?
15 and 16, all right, if I neglected them, those are on the combined list. So the combined list is 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 15, 16, 22, 23, and 25. All right, and we will have to do that by a motion to suspend the rules so that we take one vote on all of those items. But first, I will, pursuant to our rules, place the following items on our consent calendar. The first being item number 2, which is the appropriation of $45,000 to an account regarding the Shore Road Bridge rehabilitation. The next item is item 17. Item 17 is the appointment of Paul Toretta to the Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term expiring March 31, 2013. Item 18, the appointment of David Ayers to the Nathaniel Witherell Board with a term expiring March 31, 2013. Item 19, the appointment of Bruce Dixon to the Nathaniel Witherell Board with a expiration of March 31, 2013. Item 20 is the appointment of Frederick Brooks Jr. to the Alarm Appeals Board for a term expiring March 31, 2014. And the last of the consent items, the appointment of Jim Dane to the Alarm Appeals Board with a term expiring March 31, 2014. Is there any objection to the placement of those 6 items on our consent calendar? All right, hearing none. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? And just a reminder, you have seen people walking up to the front. Anyone who was not present at our January meeting and who has not yet been sworn in for the new RTM term cannot cast a vote until you have been sworn in by our town clerk. So please make sure you have done that. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Consent calendar items 2, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, and proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting, we will continue with the business of the meeting. And as previously stated, I will recommend that we suspend the rules to combine items 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 15, 16, 22, 23, and 25 for voting purposes. Is there such a motion to suspend the rules? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to combine items 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 15, 16, 22, 23, and 25 for voting purposes. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All of those in favor of the motion to suspend the rules, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. And so we will take up those combined items, and at the conclusion of the combined items, we will then take up the remaining items separately. Those will be 1, 4, 5, 11, 14, and 24. So, beginning with item number 3, Mr. Boutel. Okay, you know, Mr. Tuthill's ceased offering that additional time as part of his motion. But you would like to include that? Okay. Is there a second? All right, it has been moved and seconded to limit debate, and that is for the rest of the evening, Mr. Boutel? To limit debate for the balance of our meeting so that each speaker would be limited to 3 minutes per motion, with the exception that the proponent and principal opponent of a motion, the latter to be identified by the moderator, would be entitled to 5 minutes, Mr. Boutel? Okay. So a motion to limit debate is not debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of the limit as proposed by Mr. Boutel, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
That motion has carried. So all speakers are on notice that there is a 3-minute limit now in effect. All right. And by the way, you mentioned Mr. Tuthill, who is not with us, and I understand Mr. Tuthill was in the hospital, so if you could keep Bob in your thoughts and prayers, I know that would be greatly appreciated. Item 3 now comes before us. Do we have the resolution on that item? David Thompson of our Department of Public Works.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Resolved that the sum of $1,458,764 be, and the same is hereby appropriated, to be added to capital account number Z312-59600-219XX, to be known as AARA. Please note a recently determined typographical error to be changed to ARRA, Pavement Restoration Project. ARRA stands for American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. We just noticed that we have AARA in error.
All right. So with that, that's a substitute resolution you're offering. Will a member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution? Substitute resolution has been moved and seconded. May we have the committee reports on this? Beginning with Gordon Ennis, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll keep it brief if you don't mind. This is our chance to get our hands on some of that money that Washington's throwing around. So we're all for it. Actually, the paving budget this year is going to be reduced by $500,000 anyway. This particular project is going to be conducted at night. It's important for Public Works to get out to bid as quickly as possible so we can get ahead of other towns who are getting stimulus money. Our vote was 12-0-0, so let's go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Crowell, Chair of our Public Works
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests. Your Public Works Subcommittee met last Monday evening. Joining us for the discussion was the Commissioner of Public Works, Amy Siebert, and Deputy Commissioner Dave Thompson. Only to add to Mr. Ennis's report that the project in scope is done through the federal government and thereby regulated through the state. Because of that fact, this project, although it was actually shovel-ready last year, is not happening until this year, actually due to the red tape of the federal government. So much for shovel-ready projects, because this could have been done last year. This is a project that has been on the radar of our Public Works Department. It is in keeping with and being consistent with their list of required paving projects through the town and the software that they use to assess the roads that need to be paved. Part of the requirements in this case were that these roads had to be arterial or collector roads and not be local roads. However, the Public Works Committee is aware that there are some local roads that are in ties with some of these arterial and collector roads, and they will be evaluating those as the project comes closer. The Public Works Committee is also evaluating the condition of the sidewalks and street cuts in these areas to be sure that they're in the proper condition when the paving projects are done. They've also gone out to notify all of the utilities and the soaring department to make sure that any of the repairs, the underground work that needs to be done in these streets are done prior to the project. The commission felt that the members of the Public Works Committee were well on top of this project. It was well deserved and well needed in this area. The vote on the committee was 12-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. Mr. DeMarco, with a report of our Transportation Committee.
Yes, the Transportation Committee did decide to take this up, as well as item 2. Tuesday evening, we did ask for a representative from the Department of Public Works, but they were unable to make it. The committee was concerned about the paving project, the details of the project being as large as it is, for the great potential for functional improvements, which we would assume to be required for use of the stimulus funds. Following discussion of the project background provided in the explanos and points raised by the Finance and Public Works Committees, all members agreed the funding was too hard to pass up. The vote, however, was 9-0, with Districts 8, 9, and 12 abstaining, all feeling that information was lacking regarding the scope of the project. As we said, we had nobody there with us. Though the explanos indicate that the project entails milling, paving, and restriping, questions remained unanswered as to how the project would affect the function of the roads as transportation facilities. What qualifications had to be met to be eligible for this funding? And if they included nothing more than paving and striping, would the town, of its own volition, evaluate these roads for improvements for safe travel by all modes? The answer I received subsequently from Dave Thompson was that this stimulus funding program for this project was approved is strictly for pavement restoration. The word construction is used throughout the explanos, but this is not a construction project, which it would be if there were to be any widening, reconfiguring of curbs, or any other physical change beyond the actual pavement itself. So unfortunately, beyond smoother pavement and possibly wider shoulder stripes, we should not expect any functional improvements on any of these roads as a result of this project. Thank you.
Discussion on item 3. Mr. Brown, District 8.
Point of information to the right individual regarding the account number listed ending in XX. There was a question in our district whether that was the appropriate account number.
Mr. Thompson.
Clarification on the XX. It's our understanding that those are numbers to be filled in by the Finance Department.
So that account that is listed is a placeholder for the precise account in which the money will be placed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Fox, in your view, is such a resolution with an XX in place of 2 digits in legal order? Yes. And Mr. Fox has indicated that it is in legal order. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion on item 3. The next of the combined items now comes before us, which is item 6. May we have the resolution on that item? Mr. Von Kaiserling, Chair of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There's items number 6. Resolve that the following person nominated by the RTM Appointments Committee be appointed a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring 3/31/12.
That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. May we have the reports on that, please? Beginning with Peter Berg, Chair of our Land Use Committee.
Good evening. The Land Use Committee met with Gordon Ennis this evening prior to this meeting. Mr. Ennis joined the Condemnation Commission in 2008, so he is being reappointed. Our vote on Mr. Ennis was 11-0. District 9 was absent.
Thank you. And the report of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you, sir. We met, and as you know, the Appointments Committee is responsible for nominating to this body the Claims Committee, of which the moderator is the chair by statute or rule. Just to make a quick thing on this, there were 4 incumbents. So we voted as a slate on this that we put to you.
What report are you giving?
I'm giving the Appointments Committee reports, sir, on the Claims Committee, on this, excuse me, Condemnation Committee, forgive me. Yeah,
Okay.
yes, my mistake. We've had about 30, or we've had one meeting every week, and we will for the next 2 months with a full schedule, so it's starting to swirl around. On the matter of, Condemnation Commission, that we voted on long ago, 10-02 on that commission with Mr. Gordon Ennis. What I'm saying is we have, on condemnation, we put forward a slate, which was all 5 members. The 4 incumbents, the last one, Mr. Schulte, who was item 10, I believe, is a new member. For reasons we don't know why, it was separated into individual items before us, which is fine with us, but we hope that we could get through it quickly as a slate. So, Mr. Gordon Ennis, we all know. There's not much more to say about him. He's the chairman of our Finance Committee. He's an extremely sharp character, and he's done a good job in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Discussion on item 6. Item 7 now comes before us. Mr. Von Keisling.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On behalf of the Appointments Committee, item number 7, resolve that the following person nominated by the RTM Appointments Committee be appointed a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring 3/31/12. Richard F. Kroll, Jr. My comments are the same for Mr. Kroll.
That being offered on behalf of our committee does not require a second. Mr. Berg?
And like Mr. Ennis, the Land Use Committee met with Rick Kroll this evening prior to the full committee, and he is also a reappointment, and our vote was the same, which is 11-0, District 9 absent.
Discussion on item 7. Item 8 now comes before us.
On behalf of the Appointments Committee, item number 8, resolve that the following persons nominated by the RTM Appointments Committee be appointed as a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring 3/31/12. Joseph A. Riccardi, Sr. This is a nomination. I will say that I'm keeping my reports short because we put in our explanos the full background and basically a full CV. So if there's any questions, we'll have to take them, but we didn't want to take any more time.
Thank you. Mr. Berg with the land use report. And Mr. Berg, feel free just to take that nearest seat.
I don't mind standing. The Land Use Committee met with Mr. Ricciardi last Monday. Mr. Ricciardi is also a reappointment to the Condemnation Commission. He has served numerous terms. Our vote on Mr. Ricciardi was 12-0.
Discussion on item 8. Item 9 now comes before us.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On behalf of the Appointments Committee, item 9, resolve that the following person nominated by the RTM Appointments Committee be appointed a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring 3/31/12. Mr. Neil R. Ritter. 10-0. Our vote was 10-0-2 on all of these.
Thank you. Mr. Berg.
And the Land Use Committee met with Mr. Ritter this evening, and our vote, he is also a reappointment. Our vote was again 11-0, District 9 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 9. Item 10.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On behalf of the Appointments Committee, item number 10, resolve that the following person nominated by the RTM Appointments Committee be appointed a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring 3/31/12. That's Mr. Gregory W. Schulte. There is one comment on them. He is a new member of this committee that we're proposing. He comes from the District 12 on the east end of town, but we asked him, and there's no conflict of interest he had with any kind of sewer projects and such as we've heard of in the past. Thank you.
Mr. Berg.
And Mr. Schulte came before the Land Use Committee last Monday, and as Mr. von Keyserling said, he is a new member to the Condemnation Commission. He's replacing another member who also lived in District 12 near the sewer district, but not in the sewer district, and our vote on him was 12-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 10. Item 12 now comes before us. Peter Tessie, our first selectman. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Resolved that the RTM accept a gift in the amount equal to the actual cost, not to exceed $750,000 from the Greenwich Point Conservancy to complete full restoration of the interior space and startup at the Innis Arden Cottage, Queen Anne Building, located at Greenwich Point for use as an environmental education facility. Further resolved that the aforementioned gift will be funded by the Greenwich Point Conservancy upon approvals by the Commissioner of Public Works and Director of Parks and Recreation to properly execute the restoration.
Thank you. Will member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 12 has been moved and seconded. Well, we'll get the committee reports first. Karen Sadekhan, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening. We were delighted to have this gift brought before us by Director Mr. Siciliano, and we had Chris Franco from the Greenwich Point Conservancy with us to discuss it. As you've heard, it's the third phase of the restoration project of the building. The Bruce Museum will be using it when it's complete. This is a collaboration between the Parks and Rec Department, Department of Public Works, Conservation Commission, and some other nonprofits. One of the main questions was the maintenance of it once it was completed, and we were assured that that would be overseen by DPW and Parks and Rec. I think that probably covers most of it. There will eventually probably be a structure, a fee structure for using it. At this time, at the beginning, there will not be. The gift of $750 includes $15,000 for the first year to get it off the ground. This is really a wonderful gift, and we voted 12-0-0.
Thank you. Gordon Ennis with the report of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Finance Committee met on this last Monday. It's a final gift. One particular note is the energy configuration of the building. It is expected to be energy neutral, which means that it won't take any power from the grid. In fact, it might even be additive to the grid, which would be a very nice thing. The committee voted 12-0-0, and we can't wait to see when it's finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Jenkins, Chair of District 6.
The Queen Anne Building is located at Greenwich Point, and Greenwich Point is located within District 6. Thus, we, the representatives of District 6, felt it important to look at the gift carefully. And we do appreciate it very much, as all citizens of Greenwich do. If you look at the resolution before you, the use of the building is exclusive to an environmental education center. That said, if you read the operating plan, which is available and was supplied to us, for the operation plan for the Queen Anne Building, you will see that the use is intended for other civic and community groups, as well as environmental groups. With this in mind, District 6 passed a sense of the district resolution, which amends that which is before you. We wish to add the word primarily, just one simple word, primarily, after the word use. By making this change, the use would expand beyond just environmental education groups to include community, and civic groups, as the operation plan indicates. At our district meeting, we were very fortunate to have Chris Franco representing the Greenwich Point Conservancy, as you've heard, the generous funders of the building's restoration. He concurred that, in fact, civic groups and community groups had use, or were intended to have use of this building. The vote on this resolution were 12 in favor, 6 against. The dissenting votes believe the resolution should stop after the phrase "at Greenwich Point," and simply accept the very generous gift for the restoration of the interior building without saying who should use it. Another dissenting vote believes that private groups should be allowed to use the building as well. Once again, our motion carried. The motion that carried inserted the word "primarily" after the word "use."
Thank you. That motion to amend being offered on behalf of one of our districts, it does not require a second. Is there any objection to that amendment? We can adopt amendments upon unanimous consent. If there is a single objection, we will proceed to have discussion and take a record vote. Is there any objection to inserting the word "primarily" into item 12 in the first resolved after the word "use"? Hearing none, that motion to amend may be adopted upon unanimous consent. Further discussion on item 12? All right, item 13 now comes before us. Joseph Siciliano, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. Resolved that the Department of Parks and Recreation accept a gift valued at $30,000 from the Green Fingers Garden Club for the renovation of the area around the ferry boat landing.
Thank you. Will member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 13 has been moved and seconded. Karen Sadekhan with the report of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening again. We had Bruce Spayman present, who's Superintendent of Parks and Trees, to discuss the gift, as we had Barbara Cates and Betsy Mulcair from the Green Fingers Garden Club. This is a main part of this project is a fencing, which has been chosen in compliance with what the department wants. A sample of the fencing was passed around. It's extremely attractive color-wise and style, and there will also be landscape improvements to the embankment area, which will improve the quality of vistas. The Parks and Rec Department has agreed to fund the replacement of some new benches, which are teak, that will be used in that area also to improve it. I think we're again very, very fortunate to have these generous groups in town providing funds for our parks. Our vote was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 13. Item 15 now comes before us. Is that coming from the selectman? Peter Tessie, our first selectman.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring 3/31/13. Barbara Nolan.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 15 has been moved and seconded. Dr. Karen Vasiliotis with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you. Barbara Nolan is a candidate for the Board of Social Services. She has been a Greenwich resident for over 54 years and a social worker for over 50 years. She has an extensive resume and has served as Executive Director for Community Centers, Inc. since 1958. Ms. Nolan has also served on various boards of directors and was a founding member of Liberation House. The committee feels that her background in social work would be extremely valuable to the board. Ms. Nolan was asked about what she felt the qualities of the new commissioner should be, since there is a new commissioner pending for social services, and she felt strongly that the new commissioner should strive to work closer with smaller private agencies in town. The committee voted to approve the recommendation of Barbara Nolan to the full body of the RTM by a vote of 11-0-0, District 2 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling with the report of our Appointments Committee.
We saw our Appointments Committee interviewed Ms. Nolan on March the 2nd. I think pretty well covered the biography on Ms. Nolan. Everybody knows her. We went into some of the questions of her philosophy on it, and she thought that there was a great need in town, but unfortunately it's kind of, in the way she said, it was like an open, bottomless pit. So you could never solve all of the needs that were there, so you had to balance your financial capacity with the ability to serve the need, which we thought as being rather some probity in it. We voted for 9 in favor, 0 against, 3 abstentions. The abstentions abstained, in this case, normally I don't note the abstentions. They were concerned about another member of Board of Social Services that was not being brought forward for renomination, and they would have, I think, preferred to wait and seen the whole field instead of voting on these 2 replacements at this time. Thank you.
Discussion on item 15. Item 16 now comes before us. Mr. Tessie.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring 3/31/13. James B. McGuire.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 16 has been moved and seconded. Dr. Pasliotis with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Jim McGuire is a candidate for the Board of Social Services. He's lived in Greenwich for about 25 years. He's retired and has a financial management background. His expertise is strategic planning. He became interested in becoming a member of the board after he lost his father and was searching for various services for his mother, who is in her mid-80s. He has a time and passion to contribute to the board. He feels a strategic plan is needed for the Social Services Department, or for example, what is the scope and direction of the department? He echoed Barbara Nolan's sentiment that the services offered by social services could be a bottomless pit when it comes to social services, and there needs to be a clarity of what services the department provides and what the direction will be. Noting that the mission is to help those in need, he also stated that the department needed to identify a service portfolio so it is clear to all what services they do and do not provide. The committee voted to approve the recommendation of Jim McGuire to the full body of the RTM by a vote of 11-0-0 with District 2 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Appointments Committee met with James B. McGuire on the 2nd of March at the same time as we did with Ms. Nolan. We are, as you've heard, very impressed with his abilities. As interested as our committee has been over many years with social services and some of its ups and downs, we felt that his special talents for being able to be sort of a business doctor, if you like, in simple terms, would be much needed in this department, help it get a more solid foundation and be able to provide the services that are needed. We voted 9-0-3. The 3 abstentions for the same reason. I should clarify that nobody had any objection to either one of these candidates, thought they were sterling candidates. The abstention was simply on the other issue.
Discussion on item 16. All right, before I call for the next item, I want to report the vote on the consent calendar items. Those were items 2, which was an appropriation of $45,000, and items 17 through 21, 3 appointments to Nathaniel Witherell Board and 2 appointments to the Alarm Appeals Board. Those in favor, 198, opposed 0, abstaining 0. The consent calendar items have carried. The next combined item is item...
Moderator, we couldn't quite hear what you said on the opposed.
198, 0, 0.
0-0, thank you.
The next item to come before us is item 22. David Tice, our selectman.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, good evening. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Commission on Aging for a term expiring 3/31/13. Stephanie Palomino.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 22 has been moved and seconded. Did you want to speak on this?
No, I just want to...
All right, Dr. Pasliotis with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Sorry.
That's okay. Stephanie Palmano is a nominee for a position on the board of the Commission on Aging. She's a registered professional nurse and is certified as a gerontological nurse. She holds a license in Connecticut as a nursing home administrator. Her resume is extensive, and highlights include employment by the town of Greenwich from 1989 to 2009 as Director of Nursing and as Acting Administrator on 2 occasions at the Nathaniel Witherell. She also worked as Director of Health Planning in the Department of Health. Currently, she consults in health and home care. She serves on many boards and councils in Connecticut. If approved by the RTM to the board, she feels she would bring expertise in program and development planning to the Commission on Aging. When questioned about the Commission on Aging, she stated that she felt that the Commission is on target in their development of a strategic plan. She is also a regular attendee on the Senior Provider Network. She feels that the Senior Center needs to be improved as the facility does not meet any model for senior centers. It is not handicapped accessible, and the space does not lend itself to expanded activities that are planned for the center. She would like to see the center remain in the central part of Greenwich. She was asked if she had any views about the transfer of external entities from the Department of Social Services to the Commission on Aging, and this was done when Jim Lash was first selectman, particularly the Adult Daycare Center. And she felt that the Adult Daycare Board is more involved and self-sufficient, but agreed that the funding of external entities requires more of the Commission's oversight. The committee voted to approve the recommendation of Stephanie Palmeno to the full body of the RTM by a vote of 11-0-0, District 2 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling with the Appointments Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Appointments Committee met with Stephanie Palmeno on the 23rd of February. We voted for her 12-0-0, which was no surprise. Ms. Palmeno, first of all, is one of those wonderful examples of town employees that have done a tremendous amount of work for us, and having retired, doesn't seem to be able to stop giving to the town, so we thank her for that. But her particular skills in this set with Commission of Aging were such a fit, as well as the next candidate, that we can't help but endorse her with extreme heartiness to this body. Thank you.
Discussion on item 22. Item 23 now comes before us. Mr. Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be reappointed a member of the Commission on Aging for a term to end expiring actually in 3/31/13. Karen T. LaMonica.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 23 has been moved and seconded. Dr. Foss-Leotis.
Karen LaMonica is a nurse and has been a member of the board of the Commission on Aging for the last 6 years. She's the Chief Operating Officer of the Visiting Nurses and has served on a number of boards and committees in Westchester and Connecticut. She's the Commission's liaison to the Nathaniel Witherell Board. She noted that Tai Chi classes have become popular at the Senior Center, so anybody who's interested, sign up, although they feel that additional space is needed. She echoed the need to make changes in the facility. She also noted that the survey that was recently conducted by the Commission has allowed the Commission to target new programs and services for the baby boomer generation, which, by the way, starts at age 55. Ms. LaMonica was asked if her feelings on the Commission advocating a senior mentoring program where seniors would mentor community children needing assistance might be something the board would consider, and she felt that it was worth considering. The committee voted to approve the recommendation of Karen LaMonica to the full body of the RTM by a vote of 11-0-0, District 2 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We met at the same time with Ms. LaMonica. Our vote was the same, and our enthusiasm, I believe, was the same. Thank you.
Discussion on item 23. All right, we have one final combined item to take up. Before we get to that, let me remind interested speakers, at the completion of, when we dispose of our combined items, we will proceed with the separate items. Those are items 1, 4, 5, 11, which is the cell tower sense of the meeting resolution, 14 and 24. And there are sign-up lists for interested speakers on the cell tower issue in front of the hall and outside in the lobby. So if you have not yet and want to get on that list, I encourage you to do that now. Ms. Caldwell, could you join me up on the stage, please? Item 25 now comes before us. Mr. Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be reappointed as a regular member of the Board of Ethics for a term expiring 3/31/13. Robert Greeley.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 25 has been moved and seconded. Greg Fruman with the report of our Town Services Committee.
Town Services met with Mr. Greeley on the last Tuesday. It was a wonderful meeting. There was singing and dancing. We voted 10-0-2 in favor of him. The 2 abstentions had to do with it. Both folks had professional relationships with him. After the vote, we confirmed with Mr. Greeley that the abstentions were in fact in order.
Mr. Von Keyserling with the report of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Appointments Committee met with Mr. Greeley on the 23rd of February. Our vote was 12-0-0. We don't get music and dancing. Maybe that should we try that? I know some of the districts have hors d'oeuvres, but we were very pleased with them. I personally and some of the other members of my committee have been able to watch the Board of Ethics and its members and how well they're working. And Mr. Greeley has presented a major and integral part of what they've done in reforming and tightening up the system of Board of Ethics. So we most heartily endorse him.
Discussion on item 25. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined items 3, 6 through 10, 12, 13, 15, 16, 22, 23, and 25, and proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting, we will continue with the business of the meeting. The first of the separate items is item number 1, which is the District 9 proposed rule change, RTM rule change. And to handle that item, I will turn the chair over to our moderator pro tem, Joan Caldwell.
Item number 1 is as it appears on the call. And
Well, could you just hold on one moment, please?
Yeah. You want to repeat?
Yeah, go ahead.
Item number 1 is as it appears on the call, and Ms. Moderator
Mrs.
Pro
Fruman,
Tem.
can you wait just a moment? Item number 1 is before us, and you have a resolution with regard to item number 1.
I do.
Proceed, please.
It is as it appears on the call, and after the committee reports, I would like to be recognized to make a motion on behalf of the district.
This is a resolution offered on behalf of a district. It does not require a second. May we have the reports of the committees that considered it? I believe Legislative and Rules is the first and maybe the only.
Madam Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, this resolution coming from District 9 was taken up by Legislative and Rules Committee last Monday evening. Appearing as proponents for this resolution was Betsy Fruman, District 9 Chair, as well as Paul Curtis. Robert Bierman, who is a member of our Legislative and Rules Committee, also spoke in favor of this resolution and stated that he and fellow District 9 member Jane Arnone were the primary authors of the resolution. Our moderator, Tom Byrne, also attended our meeting and spoke in opposition to the proposed changes, especially those changes reflected in 4C concerning when the voting will be deemed to be closed. The proponents of these changes suggested that they wanted to clarify the voting procedure to ensure against the moderator having more information concerning the tally of the votes when he votes than when a rank and file member of the RTM votes. The members of District 9 who are bringing this resolution to us apparently believe that because the moderator knows the tally of the vote before he decides to vote, that this somehow gives him an unfair advantage in the voting process. By requiring the moderator to vote with his district, District 9 believes that this unfair advantage can be eliminated. The vast majority of our members of the Legislative and Rules Committee could not follow the logic of this argument. Our committee was more concerned with the fact that if the voting is deemed closed when the district turns in its voting card, this will have the effect of either disenfranchising the moderator or requiring him to vote on every item because he won't know whether his vote will matter. The problem with this, from our committee's point of view, is that it will politicize the office of the moderator. Given the fact that the moderator vote is only one of over 200 votes, his vote is under most all circumstances, except in the event of a tie, his vote is less important than the appearance of propriety and impartiality. If the moderator felt obligated to vote on each item, the losing side on each item who may have received an unfavorable procedural ruling or debate was cut off before that person had an opportunity to speak, he could then point to the moderator's vote as evidence of his bias on the issue if the moderator had voted with the majority as opposed to the side of the losing side. Some of our members also pointed out that people should be allowed to vote until such time as the vote is announced. If people have left the auditorium on personal matters during the vote, then that person should be entitled to retrieve the voting card from the town clerk to enter his vote until the vote is announced. In the same manner, our committee believes that the moderator should be entitled to wait until the voting results are in so he can decide whether it's necessary for him to break a tie or whether he can forego his right to vote in order to maintain the laudable goal of appearing to be impartial at our meetings. Our committee did not take a vote on as to legal order. It was felt by all of our committee members that the RTM or any district within the RTM is authorized to offer resolutions that would revise our rules. We therefore only took a vote on the merits of the proposal. Our vote was 1 in favor, 10 were opposed, with 1 abstention. The only vote in favor of this resolution was from District 9, and District 4 abstained. It was pointed that there was a scrivener's error. Language that had been deleted did not appear in the call. The language that was deleted but not bracketed, like the other changes that were made, is voting shall be by written ballot. In making the change, District 9 deleted the phrase shall be by written ballot, but failed to insert the brackets around that phrase to reflect the fact that their proposal had deleted that language. If need be, I can move to amend that at the appropriate time.
We can accept that recommendation.
Okay.
Were there any other committees that took this up? If not, Mrs. Fruman, District 9.
At the District 9 meeting held on Thursday, March 4th, we reviewed the minutes of the meeting of the Legislative and Rules Committee concerning this resolution. And although this was not included in the oral report, the formal report had an expressed intent of the Legislative and Rules Committee to review and potentially revise the voting rules and procedures of the RTM, which was the purpose of the District 9 resolution. District 9 moves to refer this item to Legislative and Rules for its review and action.
That is a motion from the district. It doesn't require a second. Since it is procedural, I believe that we can do it by voice vote. Is there any discussion of the resolution? Way in the back. Perhaps it'd be easier if you came forward. They can hear you better.
Jenny Kroeb, District 8. I have a question about the form of vote that we use for election of officers. The RTM rules specify that voting shall be by written ballot. Robert's rules provide that that requirement cannot be suspended even by a unanimous vote of the body. Earlier, we heard Mr. Byrne describe how a written ballot would be illegal because under Freedom of Information, we cannot have a secret vote. Robert's rules does not specify that a ballot must be secret, although it is often secret. And I'm confused about what kind of vote we are using if we are not using the ballot vote specified in our rules, and where that kind of vote is described in Robert's rules. Thank you.
Mr. Fox, do you want to take a... Yes, in the back. The chair agrees with the point of order. It really isn't a subject for discussion here. We have a motion before us. We have an amendment to that motion from District 9, a referral. Mrs. Fruman, would you be kind enough to state your motion again for me, please? I hate to drag you down here. I'm sorry. Just a motion.
This is basically just a motion to refer this item to legislative and rules for its review and action. We have not included any date on it. Is that what you're questioning?
Yeah, the whole of item 1 you wish to refer to
legislative and rules, because their original report had said that they were going to be looking at the rules. And we, on the district, felt that it would be better to look at all the rules and our entire voting procedure at one time.
Thank you. Mrs. Krasner?
I didn't hear anything from Doug Wells when he gave the Legislative and Rules Committee report that would lead us to believe that there was going to be, that they were contemplating.
Mrs. Krasner, can you come forward, please? Thank you, Mrs. Fruman.
The motion to refer to the Legislative and Rules Committee refers to the fact that the Legislative and Rules Committee said that they were going to review this
In their
rule.
written report, but Doug Wells did not include it.
So I wasn't aware that we heard that tonight as part of his report, so I would be wondering to refer it to them when they hadn't indicated that that was part. Could we have some clarification?
Mr. Wells, would you like to comment on that, please?
Ms. Fruman is correct. I routinely send around my committee report to people in the committee as well as to district chairs to circulate ahead of time. And I did indicate that our committee would be doing that. I would like to speak on the motion to refer, however, if this is the appropriate time.
You may do so.
Okay. The problem I see with referring it back to Legislative and Rules Committee is that I believe that, and I could be wrong in this, but I believe that that means that we have to bring this back just as it is here. No?
No.
Okay. All right. Very well. Then, so our committee by this motion is being given carte blanche to try to resolve this issue as best we can.
Being charged with looking at this further.
Then I have no objection to it.
All right. Is there any discussion on the District 9 motion to refer item 1 back to Legislative and Rules for further study? All right. Will the district chairs, there's a move to cut off debate. That requires an overwhelming majority. All those in favor of cutting off debate at this point, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll proceed to vote. Will the district leaders please mark your cards? Item 1, District 9 motion to refer to Legislative and Rules. Yes. Yes. I do not believe so. And if the district chairs could kind of hasten moving the card around, we can't move forward until we know the results of this vote. I have the vote on the combined items. For those of you keeping track, the vote on the combined items was 198 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions. The items have carried. If the delegates will take their chairs, please. I have the vote on District 9's motion to refer item 1 to Legislative and Rules. The vote is 144 to 56 with 3 abstentions. The motion to refer has carried. Mr. Burns would like me to return the podium to him.
Now that's what I call a second in command, yes. Great job. All right, the next separate item to come before us is item number 4. And let me get that item. All right, Dr. Karen Vasiliotis, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Tell you, I'm new at this, but this is hard work. To consider and act upon the following resolution offered by, and the call states the chairman of the Health and Human Services. Actually, the resolution that was submitted was offered by the Health and Human Services Committee. Resolved that Appendix B, description of standing committees, H, Health and Human Services, of the appendix to rules of the representative town meeting be amended to read as follows, and the rest appears as it is in the call, with the following exceptions. There are some Scrivener errors that I can either address now or later, Mr. Chairman.
Are you offering a substitute resolution?
Well, it's just some Scrivener errors that we failed to put brackets and omitted a few.
Well, why don't you address that right now?
Okay. Under the first bullet point under operational responsibility, actually the last bullet point that starts with maintenance of environmental programs covering air and water quality. In brackets, it should be and general overseeing of the disposal of solid and toxic waste and composting and septic systems, close brackets. Then as it relates to public health should be bolden. And then under overlapping responsibility, the second to last line, where it starts with for, and in brackets, the senior center and youth programs, the term within the purview of Health and Human Services should be bolden because that's in addition to the language.
Thank you. All right, that being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. May we have the reports of the Legislative and Rules Committee? Doug Wells, its chairman.
Mr. Moderator, we took up the Health and Human Service revisions to Appendix B last Monday evening. These changes were regarding these are changes regarding its operational responsibility and were in line with the recommendations of the special committee that was made last year. This appendix is merely advisory in any event, and each committee has the right to propose changes to its operational responsibility, so we were agreed that these changes were in legal order. We then noted that the resolution to fail to show certain language had been deleted, but Ms. Vasiliotis has just resolved that by pointing out where they made deletions. Our vote on the resolution, assuming the revisions would be made, and they have been made, our vote was 10 in favor, 1 opposed, District 6 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 4. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 4, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item number 5 now comes before us. David Thompson of the Department of Public Works.
Resolved that Chapter 9 of the Town Code, Refuse, be amended as follows: to waste and litter, as appears in the call.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. Doug Wells with the report of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Ladies and gentlemen, we took this matter up last Monday evening. This matter first came to the Legislative Rules Committee in September of 2009. At that time, we had Gene McLaughlin, Assistant Town Attorney, as well as Jim Campbell of the BET, who explained to us that Article 1 of this ordinance, which concerns the waste disposal section, had not been amended since the 1940s. It was felt the town should have an updated ordinance because we have a new contract with the Connecticut Resources Recovery Agency, which new contract no longer requires a put or pay provision with that agency. Attorney McLaughlin explained further that several years ago there was a charter change which put the Division of Waste Disposal under the authority of the DPW and took it away from the Department of Health. Several of these revisions have been made so as to confirm what kinds of waste can be deposited at the town's transfer station and provide for fines for unlawful dumping, which fines are to be paid to the town and not to the state. There is an increase in the fines as well for waste that is inappropriately dumped at our transfer station as provided in that ordinance. There were also updates to Article 2 regarding the disposition of litter. In September, we made some minor changes to correct some Scrivener's errors, and we voted at that time on both Articles 1 and 2. In September, our vote was 12-0-0. At our September RTM meeting, Nick Edwards of District 8 had some questions regarding whether the leaves that pile up alongside our streets during the fall are litter, as litter is defined in Article 2. The matter was referred back to the Legislative and Rules Committee for further work on Article 2 as it concerned the definition of litter. Following up on this matter in December, Gene McLaughlin met with our committee and discussed proposed changes to the definitions as it relates to landscape debris, litter, and yard waste, as those words are defined in subparagraphs 4, 5, and 10 of Section 9-12. The intent of these definitional changes is to make it clear that leaves are not litter when they are placed alongside the streets in front of one's property for pickup as designated by the town. But they could be deemed to be litter if the accumulations create a hazard. In December, we met with Attorney McLaughlin to authorize him to return this ordinance with the changes that the Law Department had suggested. We met again in March, and after reviewing the changes to Article 2, we took 2 votes, one as to legal order, one on the merits, and in each case our vote was 11-0-0, District 6 absent.
Thank you. Rick Crowell, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests. The Public Works Subcommittee met last Monday evening. Again, joining us were Commissioner of Public Works Amy Siebert and Deputy Commissioner Dave Thompson. Not much to add to Mr. Wells' excellent report. As you know, this was referred back to that committee, so this is the second time we're seeing this. The only thing that I would pass along that is that Mrs. Siebert did represent that in the imposition of the fines, that the fines were going to be imposed in a rather discretionary manner, and that they were not put into place and necessarily be there to implement up to $2,500 fines on our residents, that this was based more towards the commercial haulers that may be facilitated at our transfer station. With that being said, our vote that evening was 12-0-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 5. Mr. Crowell.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. As much as I hate to stand before you and do this, I have met subsequent to our meeting with the Public Works with several of the individuals who are associated in the commercial waste hauling business in town. And they have expressed some concerns with Section 9-11.1, the penalty, appeal, and hearing section of this ordinance, in which there is no condition within this ordinance to be able to go back to the actual waste producer, that the total onus of this article falls upon the hauler themselves. and that if a producer can be identified as to one that is in violation, as in many cases, the haulers themselves are not aware of what is contained in a lot of these containers, especially when it becomes the compaction units or the heavy dumpsters that come out of some of the different sites where waste is compacted over a period of time. These kind of wastes are easily identified as to who produced them when they get to the transfer station and actually dump the load. It can be determined if something is found in there. Obviously, 1 cubic foot of any volume of waste in violation of this provision in a 40-yard compaction container is not a lot of waste. However, these gentlemen felt as though this clause was absent of the ability to go back to the actual waste producer. So with that being said, Mr. Moderator, I'd like at this time to make a motion to refer this back to our Legislative and Rules Committee for further consideration on this point. Thank you.
All right. Also known as the ozone, I think I heard someone refer to that. Okay. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to refer item 5 to our Legislative and Rules Committee. That motion is debatable. Discussion on Mr. Crowell's motion to refer. Mr. Pruner, do you desire to speak on this?
I do, yes. I would suggest that we oppose this motion to refer. It's come before us several times. The trash haulers should, if they don't already have it in their contract, simply require that the party that generated the waste indemnify them for any fine that they occur inadvertently. And it's not the town's responsibility to have to chase down every person who is putting something into those containers and try to figure out who it is. We know who's there at the dump. Let the waste haulers simply indemnify them, and let's move on with this. So I would recommend we reject this motion to refer.
Further discussion on the motion to refer? No one. All right. Mr. Wells, chair of the committee in question.
Yeah, don't send it back to us, please. All I can tell you is that I have confirmed with a member of the BET who's followed this through its travails going through the Selectmen's Board. There was a public hearing. The trash haulers had the opportunity to be heard. We had this discussion in September. They had the opportunity to be heard in September. They knew it was coming back to my committee. They had the opportunity to be heard then. They wait until tonight to say they want a second look at this. The fact of the matter is the trash haulers have a civil right to go after the persons who are perhaps putting inappropriate things in their dumpsters. They can sue them for their loss. I don't think it's up to the town to track where the waste comes from. If it's coming into the transfer station, we have a right to impose a fine, and they have a right to go after the people that they're doing business with.
Thank you. Further discussion on Mr. Crowell's motion to refer? Mr. Santaguida, did you want to be heard? Jimmy Santaguida.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity. Just to let you know the background of our family, we've been in the hauling business for 4 generations, and unfortunately we never had problems as we do today. What I'd like to say is when they're referring to the waste generator, it's not always the people who have the dumpsters on their property. It's small contractors who come in, who open up the containers. People have no control and they're throwing things in it. I service Moneros. I service a lot of larger accounts over the years. So unfortunately, residents is usually not the problem. It's the large containers. And for them to say that we had the opportunity to speak in September, last time we spoke, I believe Peter and a few other people were at the meeting. It was 2 years ago. We've not been notified. Last time we were notified by mail. We had no notification. No one knows anything about this. So in fairness to my customers, I don't think that we should be the police, number one. And number two is they need to have the opportunity to look through the containers, which we never have the opportunity to do just because of the volume, the sizes. And when we get to the transfer station, if we were told, well, possibly we could pull out whatever was out of order, people are dumping, it could be pieces of tile, it could be this, and 1 cubic foot, I mean, to 40 yards or 100-yard compactors is really nothing at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Finocchio?
Thank you. My name's Tom Finocchio, Finocchio Brothers Sanitation, and been in business for 40 years in the town of Greenwich, picking up commercial, residential, recycling. I probably got the most fines from the town of Greenwich, and I've been appealed them for years. Our trucks come in at a gross weight of 20,000 to 40,000 pounds of commercial waste in a truck. The gentleman before says we should go back and we should fine the customers, we should take the fine, and the people, we should police it. It's very impossible. For years, we picked up pails on Greenwich Avenue. When we had called the police department, we picked out names out of the garbage. They do nothing about it. There's no ordinance, no statute. We were just told, put it to rest. Our trucks come in and we get fined. They open bags and they find recyclables in plastic bags. My drivers are very well instructed not to open up anybody's garbage for multiple reasons. Needles, Privacy Act. The commercial trucks, like I said, they come in with 20 tons of garbage. The dumpster is picked up by a fork, dumped into the truck, and put back down. You tell me how a driver is going to identify where that trash came from or recyclables came from. It's totally impossible. Now, you're asking me to pay the fines. I paid many fines in the town of Greenwich, and I'm ready to fight the town of Greenwich because I'm not paying no more fines. It's just, you know, like just last week we had another fine. I'm not paying them no more. The truck comes with 20 tons of garbage. How am I going to say Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones came from his house? How am I going to say it came from a retail store? Have no idea. If the Carter's companies, if they dump into the transfer station, they should have the opportunity to remove the recyclables or the debris. If they refuse, then you pass down a little fine. But up until that point, it's impossible to identify where it came from. Thank you.
All right. Who better to give us? Yes. I was about to say, who better to give us the poop on waste? Mr. von Keyserling.
Well, you've done it, Mr. Moderator. I'm actually speechless. Now that we can get back to the matter of business, which is rather important to these gentlemen we're talking about, and oddly enough important to you and I, because we're the ones that produce the garbage or the poop, and we have to get it out of our way and it has to be gone. When they were talking, if you read in the paper a little while back, there's a question of maybe that we would charge a tipping fee to everybody, that all garbage that came in, since Greenwich does not charge a tipping fee and other towns do, the theory was that why would people in other towns have to pay $80 a ton or $180 a ton, pay that instead of bringing it to Greenwich and dumping it, and individuals. The argument was made by the administration possibly to consider, and it hasn't been totally debated out, but it's certainly in the process of the thinking, that the competition in the refuse pickup field is tough enough and tight enough and heavy enough that any extra fees that were charged to the carting companies, the actual people who pulled your poop away, were not going to be passed on to the customer. Now, that's a theory. I haven't seen one yet where somehow the guy in business for a profit doesn't pass his costs on to the customer, but apparently the competition is going to keep it down. Well, if we accept that theory, and we accept what these gentlemen are saying, that they get these things thrown in their dumpsters, it's really not possible or feasible for them to verify and do that, but they're going to get charged anyhow, $2,500, I think is one of these fines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which mounts up pretty quickly in the volume they're doing. They're supposed to, should we use the term eat this? Fine. I don't think a businessman is going to eat that fine, is he? But what is he going to do? You say go back to the people who created it, the office building, the customer, and say, look, because our esteemed head of legislative rules said they have civil action, they can go in and sue them for the damages caused them by that customer. Well, if we have such a huge competition of garbage companies in the business, and we're already in our town trying to keep our local garbage men here and not have one big waste management company take over all the garbage hauling in town like some communities and get a monopoly, do you think that these people can afford to go sue their customers and keep that account? Something's got to give. It's an unrealistic position you're saying. This is not a remedy that's appropriate. All they're asking for is an opportunity to talk this out. It's not going to make any difference. We're not getting any outside dumping. We found that there was 5% when the audit was done. 5% out of 50,000, 150,000 tons of stuff a year we do. And that was even denied or challenged by the head of our facility, Holly Hill, Mr. McKee, who didn't believe it was as high as 5. We've had people in there, we put people in that house now to verify it, to check the stuff coming in. As far as we know now, there is no outside garbage of any
30
significance
seconds.
coming into Greenwich. So we're not under some gun that we're getting, swamped by outside garbage. I think this was a remedy that was made for a situation that happened in the past, and the town has moved to remedy. It's done it. It doesn't need to be, and we certainly don't need to punish them without their chance to give their piece. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Crowell motion to refer. Vince DeMarco, District 9, to be followed by Betsy Fruman, District 9, to be followed by Tom Cornelius, District 3.
Mr. Moderator, the ordinance, the resolution, Section 9, it's the very last line, actually, in Article 1, I guess it is, 9-11.1C, says fines shall be payable to the town and may be appealed within 10 days to the commissioner. So I'm not sure why that doesn't cover all bases.
Thank you. Betsy Fruman, be followed by Tom Cornelius.
I wanted to talk from the viewpoint of a small building owner. I have no idea what people are putting in our dumpster. It's out there day and night, and sometimes I'll look at it and open it up, and there is more trash in there than we could possibly have come from our building. So I agree with them. There is no way to tell where that trash is coming from, and to find the hauler or to find me is not an answer.
Tom Cornelius, District 3.
Good evening, everyone. Tom Cornelius, refuse hauler, RTM member. I'd have to be in complete agreement with my competitors who spoke tonight. It is a big problem, and it should be clarified by legislative and rules. I hate to bring it back to them again, but this is a pretty important ordinance that's going to be in place. And from what I understand is it's not going to be from John McKee or Patrick Collins. You'd have to have a substantial amount of debris for them to fine you. But that doesn't mean when there's new people in place that they're not going to understand that it is a hard thing to patrol and police. And I cannot possibly know what goes in my load. It's dark in the morning at times. You dump the containers, and there's things in there, and I don't want to get into tipping fees now. We'll have plenty of time to discuss that. But if tipping fees do go into place, then there will be a large amount of this going on where people won't want to go and pay at the dump. So I really wish we could vote it back to legislative and rules and clarify this. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Crowell motion to refer item 5 to our Legislative and Rules Committee. Well, we'll see if there's anyone else. You've spoken, Mr. DeMarco. Is there anyone else who cares to speak on the motion to refer? Mr. DeMarco.
Okay, I wasn't aware of this, that the clarification here regarding my previous point about the appeal process, the clarification is that in that same section, in the second line, A, the superintendent at the refuse station, or the transfer station, I suppose, actually works for the Commissioner of Public Works. So the appealing process goes to the same department. So I guess the question is actually the appealing process, that there really ought to be an outside arbiter, if you would, someone else who hears this rather than internally in the department. It doesn't seem to be fair. The appeal process is not fair. So I would recommend that we do send this portion of it back to the Legislative and Rules to work on.
All right. Any further comments on the motion to refer? This being a procedural issue, we can take a voice vote on it. And this is to refer the entire item, not a portion of it. So if you are in favor of sending this back to Mr. Wells, who is waving his hands over there vigorously, you should vote in favor. If you are opposed and want to continue considering it tonight, you should vote no. All those in favor of Mr. Crowell's motion to refer item 5 to our Legislative and Rules Committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. That motion has carried. All right, the next item is the cell tower sense of the meeting resolution. Bob May, Chair of District 12.
Mr. Moderator, town officials, members, and guests, after carefully listening to debate in the standing committees, which were assigned item 11, and receiving input from our members who attended all the district meetings last week, District 12 unanimously voted to offer this substitute resolution for item 11. And I read, whereas T-Mobile USA is proposing to build a wireless telecommunication facility comprised of an estimated 100-foot structure at 328 Palmer Hill Road, this location being 230 feet from North Mianus Elementary School, a school with 454 kindergarten and 200 kindergarten to 5th grade students plus staff, 160 feet from the North Mianus School kindergarten playground, and 600 feet from the Bridges School, which opened in 2010 with 74 students from 2 to 5 years old plus staff. And whereas the Greenwich Board of Education has consistently stated that it opposes similar wireless telecommunication structures on its properties, adjacent properties, or in close proximity to such properties, now therefore it is the sense of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting that wireless telecommunication structures, as regulated by the Connecticut Siting Council, not be constructed within 1,500 feet of any accredited school located in the town of Greenwich. This substitute resolution has been widely circulated to the RTM members via email, and copies were available at the door of tonight's meeting. Thank you.
All right, that substitute resolution being offered on behalf of one of our districts, it does not require a second and is currently before us. Is there any need for me to read it again? Okay. Let us get the reports of the committees that considered this, beginning with Bob Brady, Chair of our Education Committee.
Good evening. With your indulgence, Mr. Moderator, I would like to report on a couple of Education Committee administrative matters. At our meeting in January, Josh Brown was elected Vice Chairman, District 8, and Kim Blank of District 7 was elected our Secretary. And also, Steve Warzoa of District 9 is the delegate now representing District 9 in the Education Committee until such time as Bob Lichtenfeld, who was hired away from us by Dr. Freund of the Board of Ed to act as the interim managing director of operations, basically Sue Wallerstein's former job, which position he expects to hold on an interim basis until the end of June, perhaps, and then we'll get Bob back. We were very pleased to get Bob Lichtenfeld to the Education Committee because he is the former and now retired superintendent of the Katona Lewisboro School District.
Mr. Brady, while we're doing administrative matters, let me just interrupt and give the report of the vote on item number 4, which was the proposed change to the description of the responsibilities of our Health and Human Services Committee. Those in favor, 194. Opposed, 3. Abstaining, 2. Item 4 has carried. All right, Bob Brady speaking, giving the report on item 11 of the Education Committee.
The Education Committee met on March 1 to consider item 11, the District 12 sense of the meeting resolution. Ned Bancroft, District 12 presented it. There were a number of people from District 12, as in addition to Peter Scheer from the Board of Education, who added additional information. The principal concern raised by District 12 is that the cell tower radio frequency radiation may be injurious to children, and therefore the cell tower should not be placed near schools. The 1,500-foot limit is one adopted by some European jurisdictions. While there are no peer-reviewed studies that substantially support the technical risk, there certainly is a possibility, and that the proponents of this contended it would take a number of decades to find out whether there's a risk or whether there is injury, and that prudence would argue for not taking the risk. There was discussion of the definition of school, and that has been, I think, resolved by the substitute resolution, which more clearly defines what is intended. The concern was also expressed that the resolution might increase. There's concern that this resolution might increase pressure on the first selectman to find other spaces for cell tower operators because they negotiate a place on private land in an undesirable position, and we get into the situation that Mr. Tessie was looking for someplace else to put it. The vote of the committee, that being considered, the vote on the committee was 11 in favor, 0 opposed, with 1 abstention. The abstention was District 7, believing the 1,500-foot limit was too arbitrary. District 8, and I think several of us voted yes, but we're concerned about the definition of school. As I said, I think that was resolved. So it was 11-0-1 in favor of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Wells with the report of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
We took up item 11 last Monday evening. Speaking as a proponent for this resolution was Legislative and Rules Committee member Ed Manganello of District 12. Our committee had concerns about this matter as it related to legal order, because while it appears to be a sense of the meeting resolution, it doesn't direct any public official to do anything or to refrain from doing anything. It does not direct any town or other public official to convey District 12's message to the Siting Council, which is the entity that decides where the cell towers will be located. There is also concern about the town's exposure to liability if we pass this resolution as drafted. It appears we are not, since we have a substitute resolution, so some of these concerns are no longer an issue. The concern that we expressed, however, is if we passed a resolution that suggests that towers be more than 1,500 feet from our schools, and then a tower is placed within 1,500 feet of a residential area where children are living 365 days a year as opposed to about half that time for a school year, what is the town's liability with respect to those residential neighbors that have a cell tower placed within the 1,500 feet limit? We took a vote as to legal order because of our concerns concerning whether this was a sense of the meeting resolution. Our vote was 0-11 with District 6 absent. We took a vote on the merits of the resolution. Our vote was 6 in favor, 5 opposed, with District 6 absent. I will point out that the resolution that has been offered is now so different that you really don't have committee input on what this new resolution says, because so much of the language has been changed, and in fact does appear to be in the appropriate form as the sense of the meeting resolution now.
Thank you. Karen Fosiliotis with the Health and Human Services Committee report.
Our committee members considered item 11 on the call, District 12's resolution regarding cell tower placement in schools. Members from District 12 were present for the discussion. Greg Schulte of District 12 spoke to the group about the resolution. He noted that in January, District 12 met to pass the resolution and later came to the conclusion that it was time to bring the resolution to the full body of the RTM. The resolution was the product of RTM and community members' input. The district's objective in proposing the resolution is to start a discussion and to, quote, draw a line in the sand. Mr. Schulte acknowledged that the Telecommunication Act of 1996 and the Connecticut State Siting Council guide the siting of cell towers within the state and our town. The Connecticut Siting Council is required to consider municipal law in the siting of cell towers, but it rarely does so. He also noted that 30 municipalities have passed similar resolutions. The sentiment in District 12 is that, according to Mr. Schulte, we are always putting our children second, and that needs to change. District 12 stated that various health studies have shown that placing cell towers near schools pose a health risk. And they also distributed literature and study summaries describing potential health effects to committee members. The committee also received an overview of cell tower transmissions from Wayne Jervis, a town resident who has become an advocate for changing how cell towers are sited in the state and the town. Mr. Jervis also forwarded studies and information on cell towers to members of the committee. He noted that while the State Siting Council must consider certain things, such as municipal laws, property values, and other things, in actuality, these considerations are largely discarded in the final siting of a tower. The Siting Council has generally worked with the various telecommunications company with the main goal of providing complete network coverage within the state, regardless of where the towers are sited. The committees questioned the wording of the resolution and asked District 12 representatives if this resolution was a sense of the meeting resolution or an actual resolution, and I think we've already heard that it was intended to be a sense of the meeting resolution, and that is addressed in the substitute resolution. A question as to the term wireless telecommunication facility and wireless telecommunication structure versus the term cell tower was also asked. The committee was informed that these terms were used because they were the terms used in the T-Mobile application, and the District 12 wanted to be consistent with that application. Questions also arose as to whether there was an actual health risk due to exposure to electromagnetic radiation based on the current science. Committee members also noted that the FCC did not allow health concerns to be a factor in siting a cell tower as long as the tower meets FCC specifications, and expressed concern that the resolution was basing one of their criteria for citing on potential health effects. This has also been addressed and removed from the substitute resolution. It was pointed out that in actuality, the, quote, dose makes the poison, and it was unclear as to what exposure levels from these towers actually are. One member noted that the probability of harm from talking on a cell phone while driving was likely greater than exposure to a cell tower in itself. Others questioned why 1,500 feet was chosen, and it was explained that 1,500 feet was a recognized international precautionary standard. Although District 12 reps, when asked how that 1,500 feet would it be measured from the center of the building, the end of the building, they weren't clear as to how it would be measured. It was also noted that State Senator Scott Franz and State Representative Fred Camillo were introducing potential state legislation regulating cell towers at 750 feet, and this would be in conflict with our proposed resolution. The committee also noted that there was not a clear understanding as to the actual number of cell towers currently in town. This was a long meeting. The website www.antennasearch.com provides the siting of cell towers and antennas within a 4-mile radius of the address that is entered. One committee member entered their address and discovered that there was one registered cell tower, and then the question was, what is a registered cell tower? And 12 unregistered cell towers and 228 antennas located within a 4-mile radius of their home. Some of the towers could potentially be within 1,500 feet of a school, which would conflict with the resolution being considered. Another question was raised as to whether a town task group could be formed to examine the issue looking at the big picture. The committee also noted that there were other vulnerable groups, such as the aged and those with medical conditions, that were not included in this resolution. While District 12 members agreed that there were other potential vulnerable groups, they felt strongly that children should be the top priority in light of the T-Mobile's proposal. I want to stress that committee members strongly agree that the health and welfare of our children are important, and we fully support the concept of the resolution. However, many members expressed a concern about some of the language in the resolutions I stated before, why only children are mentioned and not other people, that are potentially vulnerable, such as people with dementia or Alzheimer's, which have also been mentioned in articles discussing potential health effects. Some committee members were also troubled by the resolution referencing potential health effects. Again, that has been addressed in the substitute resolution. And also the fact that there are lack of any definitive studies showing actual health effects from exposure to cell towers meeting FCC specification. After lengthy discussion, a motion was made to call the vote and was seconded. The committee voted 4 in favor, 3 opposed, with 4 abstentions, District 2 absent. Those opposed and abstaining stated they were still struggling with the exposure health issue, the lack of conclusive health and safety studies showing an increased risk to exposure, and the definition of wireless telecommunication facility and wireless telecommunication structure, as well as the failure to consider the measures currently being considered on the state level.
Thank you. Peter Berg with the report of our Land Use Committee.
Good evening again. The Land Use Committee took up item 11 at our regular meeting last Monday night. Mr. Greg Schulte and Miriam Menon from District 12 were with us. Miriam Menon is the District 12 member of the Land Use Committee. Mr. Schulte is the alternate. Mr. Schulte is also the principal author of item 11. Mr. Schulte reviewed the events of last May and June 2009 when the Greenwich Planning and Zoning Commission heard T-Mobile's application to construct an 80-foot tall antenna near North Mianus School. The antenna was opposed by many residents of North Mianus who fear serious health effects on children while at North Mianus School. They also fear detrimental impact on residential property values within the entire school district, since, as Mr. Schulte stated, the school would be considered toxic by homebuyers. In June 2009, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously that T-Mobile find an alternate site. A member of the committee asked Mr. Schulte if an RTM vote for item 11 might be interpreted by various bodies and individuals as a vote in favor of putting a cell tower in Montgomery Pinetum Park. This past December, we learned that the town had offered the park as the alternate site to North Mianus. T-Mobile accepted the town's offer, and the town had negotiated a lease agreement for a cell tower in Montgomery Pinetum Park. In January of this year, the North Mianus Coalition published a document that advocates for putting the tower in the park, calling that site in letters, emails, quotes in the paper as the lesser of two evils. Mr. Schulte said, a vote for item 11 is not a vote to put the tower in the park. In order to ensure such an understanding, a member moved to amend the District 12 resolution to say the RTM opposes cell towers near schools, and it also opposes the cell tower proposed for the Montgomery Pinetum Park. The Land Use Committee voted 9-1 to amend the resolution. We then voted 8-0 on the amended resolution with 4 abstentions, Districts 2, 9, 7, and 12. At an appropriate time, Mr. Moderator, I'll introduce the Land Use Committee's amended resolution. The Land Use Committee did not take a vote on item 11 as it appears in the call.
Okay. There being no further committee reports, I will recognize you, Mr. Berg, to offer the Land Use Committee amendment.
And so the amended resolution deletes all of the whereas clauses, of which there is now only one, and the words now therefore at the beginning of the resolution, and inserts in its place resolved that, and inserts a semicolon in place of the period at the end of the resolution, and then inserts a new resolution paragraph after the existing resolution that reads as follows. We further hereby resolve that a wireless telecommunication, I'm sorry, it is further resolved that it is the sense of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting that wireless telecommunication structures, as regulated by the Connecticut Siting Council, not be constructed within the Montgomery Pine Needham Park in the town of Greenwich.
Do you have copies of that
I
for
do.
us? All right. Mr. Berg, let me just make sure I understand what we are doing here. The proposed amendment is to delete the whereas clauses and to change the now therefore to resolved that it is the sense of the meeting. And then add one final further resolved. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
That deals with the Pine Needham location. All right. Is there any need? So that motion amend being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second and is currently before us. Is there any need for me to reread it? Okay. All right. Does everyone have a copy of the substitute sense of the meeting resolution from District 12? You do not. All right. I will simply read that first and then describe what the amendment will do. There are two whereas clauses in the substitute resolution that is currently before us, and one now therefore clause. Whereas T-Mobile USA is proposing to build a wireless telecommunications facility comprised of an estimated 100-foot structure at 328 Palmer Hill Road, this location being 230 feet from North Mianus Elementary School, a school with 454 kindergarten to 5th grade students plus staff, 160 feet from the North Mianus School kindergarten playground, and 600 feet from the Bridges School, which opened in 2010, with 74 students from 2 to 5 years old plus staff. And whereas the Greenwich Board of Education has consistently stated that it opposes similar wireless telecommunications structures on its properties, adjacent properties, or in close proximity to such properties. Now, therefore, it is the sense of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting that wireless telecommunications structures, as regulated by the Connecticut Siting Council, not be constructed within 1,500 feet of any accredited school located in the town of Greenwich. The proposed amendment is to delete those first two whereas clauses, the only whereas clauses, and simply change the word now therefore, the words to resolved that it is the sense, and everything else remains the same, and adds this additional resolved clause. It is further resolved that it is the sense of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting that wireless telecommunications structures, as regulated by the Connecticut Siting Council, not be constructed within the Montgomery Pine Needham Park in the town of Greenwich. All right, so that is the proposed amendment. Discussion on the motion to amend. Yes, Mr. Von Keisling. Well, did the committee vote on the substitute resolution, Mr. Berg?
The committee did not vote on the substitute resolution. However, the whereases that we deleted appear in the original resolution.
All right. All right, but they were different whereases.
I don't believe so. Well, I think they may have expanded on the number of children or something.
Well, what is in our call has multiple more than 2 whereas clauses. This only has 2. The
Correct.
substitute.
But we,
I think the question is you are offering a committee motion to amend that was directed at what was in our call. Is that correct?
That's correct. However, the substitute resolution includes the same whereases, even though they've been.
All right. Hang on. As I understand it, let's just make this clear. As I understand it, the committee, the land use committee, acted on what was in our call, which was simply different than the substitute. We're not going to have a problem here. We will be able to take up your motion to amend. Let's just deal with the technical issue here. And while there have been some minor word changes in the resolved clause that was offered tonight, that does not change the intent of the resolution that was in our call. So it was the intent of our land use committee to delete any whereas clauses. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And to add an additional resolution that would express a desire that there be no telecommunications structures constructed within the Pine Needham Park. Correct?
That's correct.
All right, so that is in order. That is currently before us. We understand that District 12 amended and presented a substitute tonight, but that action cannot prevent our committee from offering this motion to amend. Mr. Von Keisling. Speaking on the pending motion to amend.
Mr. Moderator, I find it difficult that a committee of ours can stop, consider, and debate an item a week or so ago, make a decision on that item, and consider that that still applies clearly to a new item, which is a substitute resolution. Often we see substitute resolutions change, and consider that just as applicable to any other substitute resolution that may come along. That's a judgment call perhaps on the leadership of the committee, but it's not an action of the committee, number one. Number two, I believe there was a discussion tonight. The committee did meet tonight and did have the substitute resolution and the whereases that go along with it in their hand, in their discussion prior to this meeting tonight, 7:30 or so. And it is my understanding that the committee did not take up the substitute resolution or make any action to address it. It would seem to me if the opportunity was not there for the committee, we might say, okay, they didn't have a chance to change and be more direct to their response. Here they were met for a half hour and studied it and debated it and talked about it and refrained from taking action on that. I think that's significant. The committee seems to have backed away from its position. Thank you.
Further, all right. Now, let me say, I did put a speaker sign-up list out on this very issue, the land use amendment. So, at this point, I will recognize those who indicated a desire to speak, beginning with Greg Schulte, District 12, to be followed by Anthony D'Ascolo. And I remind all of our speakers there is a 3-minute limit in effect. Mr. Schulte, I have heard that you are the prime mover of this amendment, so you will have up to 5 minutes as the principal opponent of the amendment.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town officials, fellow RTM members, and distinguished guests. As a new RTM member, it's a distinct honor to speak with you tonight. It's especially an honor to speak in support of my community and, more importantly, the children of this town. Over the past 10 years, I've coached over 40 sports teams, been president of North Penn Bulldogs, and vice president of GYFL. I have coached and been in contact with thousands of your children, and there's one thing I know for sure. We are blessed with amazing kids in this town. And working with them has been one of the most enjoyable and rewarding experiences of my life. looking around this room, I know many of you have shared and share in those experiences every season. The issues I have been involved with before I joined the RTM and since I joined the RTM has been in this town where we have so many conflicting priorities to give a voice to these children. Item 11 was meant to take the discussion away from all the fragmented discussions we've had in this town over the last 3 months and bring it back to the children. This amendment is exactly what item 11 was meant to avoid. Mr. Burke said, I spoke in front of the Land Use Committee, and while they proposed their amendment, I believe that the amendment that they proposed was flawed for a number of reasons. First of all, in the press release and the minutes that followed, they quoted me and District 12's positions to be North Manus versus the Montgomery property. People who are in the room can tell you nothing was further from the truth. It was always about schools, protecting schools, and the greater good of the town. What can we do to protect what institutions we can that would have relevance in front of the Siting Council? So this was one area where I disagreed with the amendment. The next objection I had with the amendment was last week, as most of you know, we went out to the relevant committees, we went out to the districts, we discussed the issues, we talked. Obviously, we had very, very healthy discussions, led to our substitute resolution, and I think this is in the best interest of everyone. I think it's the best interest of the way this body should work, and we did make adjustments in the substitute resolution. The Land Use Committee basically passed our amendment on Monday night and then were vacant from the discussion. And again, throughout the entire process, they decided they would piggyback with what we did. And I can tell you there was a lot of sleepless nights writing, editing, working on this resolution to get it to where it was. And I think you can't have an amendment they had without going through that process. It just doesn't hold the water that we had by the time we got to the end of this process tonight. The primary reason why the Land Use Committee has passed their Montgomery property resolution, which they passed in December and never decided to take to this body, was because they felt that the intent of Colonel Montgomery's lease was not clear, or Colonel Montgomery's deed was not clear. So I'm going to read this directly from page 2, paragraph 2, concerning his intent. All of the land on the easterly side of Bible Street and tracks A, B, and C on the map entitled Property Devised to Town of Greenwich by Robert H. Montgomery of Greenwich, Connecticut, dated October 21st, 1953, and bearing number 3043 in the office of the town clerk of said town of Greenwich, together with buildings and improvements thereon, may be sold by the town of Greenwich at such times and such parcels in such order and for such amounts as the said town hall shall seem best. Provided, however, nothing herein contained shall deem to preclude the sale of such additional portions of said premises, divide to the town as aforesaid, as may be authorized and justified under and pursuant to the terms of said devise.
1 minute remaining.
Okay, gotcha. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that says that the intent was clear, that Colonel Montgomery, in his wisdom, foresaw the potential sale and use of this property. So clearly what we've been hearing since December isn't the case. Intent was stated in the lease. Also, in the Department of Rec's property of inventory is the following. Map number 3043, which is the property we're discussing, for park or garden may be sold with proceeds to be used solely for care and maintenance of park, estate of Robert Montgomery, 1052. Note, RTM Resolution, June 19th, 1954, authorizing selectmen to sell certain properties devised to the town under the will of Montgomery. So not only could be sold, it can be sold without the RTM's approval. The selectmen were given that authority in 1954. So not only is the intent clear, but the RTM, like I said, has transferred these rights.
Time is up.
Okay, last I wanted to say, our resolution is, the sensitive meeting resolution is ready to go. The amendment isn't. Let's act on the sensitive meeting resolution that we have tonight and let the amendment go forward later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony DiScolo to be followed by David Roberson. Yes. If I call your name, Mr. Okay, David Roberson, to be followed by Janet DeLuca. I'd ask the following speakers to come forward and sit in the chairs at the front.
Hi, Dave Robertson, District 12. Fellow members, I'll keep my remarks short. I urge you to reject this amendment. While it seems like a potentially well-meaning compromise, its effect is to neuter the resolution. Why? Because the resolution is not binding and only serves to express our community's preference to the Siting Council, in this case to keep these structures away from our schools. Sure, we could add the Pinetum, or coffee houses, or other parks, or post offices. Heck, we could make it 1,500 feet from banks and put the whole town off limits. But it's not binding. And the more we make it look like this resolution is saying, we don't want any cell towers anywhere, the more it's just going to be ignored by the Siting Council. So, what we have to do is express a clear preference, or else make this whole thing pointless. The resolution concerning schools deserves its own up or down vote. If others want similar resolutions for the Pinetums or other sites, they should introduce specific resolutions for those places, for their own up or down vote. Let's reject this amendment, keep the message clear, and take the vote. Thank you.
Janet DeLuca. Karen, whose last name begins with an A. Thank you. Chris Sardone. To be followed by Christine Ragusa.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was asked to come and talk to you guys tonight because I, like Greg, have spent 9 of the last 10 years as a coach in the GYFL. 8 of those years in North Mianus. I live in District 8. And I actually have a friend who is a retired Marine who made his living building cell towers. And I was at his house on Saturday night and I talked to him about this issue. And he himself, when he started, used to climb these towers while they were on and work on them. And I said, so you're for putting them near a school? And he said, if you're going to make an exception, if you're going to be cautious, the place to be cautious is around schools. And I understand that this resolution is now has Pinetum piggybacked on it, and I just don't agree with that. I think this is about our children, the most precious commodity we have, and I think it is vitally important that we make sure that the resolution is passed as it relates to schools. And like I've heard tonight, other issues, banks, whatever, coffee houses can be dealt with at another time, but it's vitally important to be cautious as it relates to our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Ragusa. Thank you. Thank you. Wayne Jervis.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the RTM. I just wanted to mention that I'm a father of 3 children. My wife is pregnant. Both are demographics that are potentially at risk to low-level long-term radio frequency emissions. That being said, and I do agree with the concerns of District 12 that children are a vulnerable population group. I think there are other vulnerable population groups, as came up from the Health and Human Services Committee's discussion of item 11. I think those concerns are all valid. I think that parks and open spaces are another, would represent another constituency's interests that are as well valid. I think Pinetum squarely fits in that group. I would say that all of these issues are not necessarily in conflict I would add, moreover, that in that vein, I would support, or in that spirit, I would support the amendment to protect the Pinetum, although I would like to see it encompassed in a much larger view that addressed the overall open spaces and parks needs of the town of Greenwich. Likewise, I think that the issues of protecting children, although important, are not unique. There are other population groups that need to be protected, like the elderly, which are clearly not addressed in this item 11 or in the amendment. That being said, I think the correct venue to address all of these issues would be the Selectmen's Task Force, which was announced on Thursday, March 4th. As Peter Tessie said mentioned at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. Now that, I think, is a venue in which all of the, not necessarily competing, but unique interests of the town can be addressed in that forum. And I would hope that the RTM would consider that prejudicing the task force may not be in the best interests of the town by passing a resolution that prematurely made decisions or since the meeting resolutions without taking all of these various factors into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that exhausts the list of those who signed up. Further discussion on the Land Use Committee motion to amend item 11. Mr. Boutel.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, Jim Boutel, I serve as the chairman of District 8, which obviously is the location of the Pinetum. We had a number of members of District 12 attend our district meeting. I tried to run as fair and balanced a meeting as I could. I, for one, as a member of District 8, intend not to support this amendment, to keep the underlining nature of 11 strictly dealing with schools. I would hope that the other members of District 8 would support me in that, because I'll point out to the full body, let's make this about schools tonight. If you're concerned about the Pinetum, for the Pinetum to have a tower put in, the first selectman is going to have to bring us a lease of that property. It can't just happen on its own. Until that lease exists, Connecticut Siting Council can't site a tower there. Let's keep the two items separate. And I hope with District 8 supporting the motion of District 12 tonight, the other members of the RTM would support District 8 when the time comes with regards to the Pinetum. And I would simply say whoever put the sign on the door as we entered here, just addressing the delegates of District 8, I find it offensive.
Peter Tessie, our first selectman. Mr. Brady, did you want to speak? All right, be followed by Mr. Brady.
Good evening, once again, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Clearly, the town of Greenwich is addressing an issue of great import to it. It is an issue that has generated a great deal of emotion. And one of the things I always like to do when issues like this come to the fore is to lower the level of emotion because it becomes counterproductive in achieving the overall objective if we have divided stance from the town of Greenwich. And so over the last several months, clearly we've tried to work to avert a tower at the adjacent to the North Mayanis School. We abided by the processes that are in place at the state level in terms of working through our planning agency, making alternative recommendations of potential sites elsewhere. And clearly we've had tremendous amount of input and support from the community. One of the things that we had not done and that I think clearly should be done is to harness the resources of the Greenwich community. Our strength is our people. I've said that over and over again, and I think it would be wise for the town, through our Board of Selectmen, which is elected by the town at large, to bring together all the various elements who have such strong opinions on this issue. So we are moving forward, as we voted on March 4th, to form a cellular communication infrastructure task force. The primary focus of the task force will be identifying current and future carriers and their respective infrastructure. Concurrently, the group will define and detail what service deficiencies exist throughout the town. And after taking those results from each of the tasks, the town will be able to proactively determine what, if any, actions need to be taken. These potential actions will be based on thorough research regarding potential alternatives, which we've heard quite a bit about over the last several months, DAS, impact on community character, using our natural resources, Pine Needham, and define need. You know, what is the necessity for these companies to request having these towers erected? The task force will be appointed by the board, as I said, and include representation from town professional staff, who I believe will be critical to the overall success of this committee's mission. The staff will be representative of our law area, conservation, both the director and member of the commission, our emergency services, because we have, in addition to personal cellular communication towers, we have the 800 megahertz systems. We can address what the present services are provided for EMS, and of course planning and zoning. The expectation is that this group can conduct its work in a 60 to 90 day period. And I would just close that I do want to thank the folks in District 12, because I do think their resolution is a sound one in terms of we do not want them adjacent to schools. I made that very clear back in June, and that is what precipitated the drive to find an alternative location. So thank you, District 12 and Mr. Schulte, for reinforcing that. But clearly, in my humble opinion, it's clear that we have to address it from a business perspective and what is the necessity, because the Siting Council doesn't seem to look at these other aspects. But clearly, if they can address, if we can address the necessity for erecting this tower and others and deem it unnecessary based upon level of proficiency of existing equipment, then I think we have a better leg to stand on. But certainly, united we stand, divided we fall. So let's try to coalesce, get behind a strategy, and move forward. Thank you.
Mr. May, did you want to be heard on this? All right, so Bob Brady to be followed by Bob May.
Mr. Moderator, through you, two questions to the town attorney. The first is based on what Mr. Patel said just a few moments ago, which I think confirms my understanding of our charter, but I would like to hear from the town attorney that would any agreement, document, license that purports to transfer rights to a cell tower operator through lease, sale, or some other device, would that have to come before this body for its approval before it would become effective? That's question one.
License. Ooh.
We licensed the.
No,
it was done for a purpose. The second question is related to that, and that is, again, it's my understanding that if there's any significant change in use of land owned by the town that is proposed, it must receive municipal approval, municipal improvement authorization from planning and zoning, which is, regardless of the outcome of the planning and zoning's decision, appealable to this body by a town resident within 30 days of the notice of that action by planning and zoning, so that a cell tower would have to come to the body on that basis. Am I correct in those two beliefs?
Mr. Fox, would you care to respond?
Thank you.
The questions are, would this have to come back to the RTM if a cell tower were to be erected at the Pine Needham, and would it require a municipal improvement?
Any use of town property, which most likely would be in the form of a sale or a lease. I cannot see any wireless company ever suggesting a license which would be revocable, but any lease or sale would have to be approved by this body. Secondly, the section he refers to will be Section 99, which talks about the location, relocation, major redesign, extension, or abandonment of any street or sewage disposal plant. That would also have to come before this. It would have to go before, it would be an MI would be required and would have to go to planning and zoning, which is appealable.
Thank you. Bob May, to be followed by Irv Porter of District 6.
I rise on behalf of District 12 to oppose the proposed amendment offered by the Land Use Committee. Adding it to our sense of the meeting resolution will dilute the message we intend to send to T-Mobile, our elected officials, local end in Hartford, and the Connecticut Siting Council. Our resolution is simple, straightforward. We don't want to see cell telephone towers sited within 1,500 feet of any accredited school in Greenwich. If the Land Use Committee wants to protect parkland and open spaces from these structures, let them offer a separate resolution which hopefully will cover all such properties in town, not just one specific tract. I strongly urge the RTM members to vote down this amendment. Thank you.
Irv Porter, District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm torn badly. I have a daughter, a son-in-law, 2 kids that live well within 750 feet of the proposed cell tower at 328 Palmer Hill Road. One goes to North Miami School, and one will go to North Miami School. You've heard from the first selectman that District 12's message has been clearly heard, and that in his judgment, it's appropriate to study this further, if for no reason other than there's a consistent, coherent message that penetrates what the Siting Council will listen to. I know about the Siting Council business from previous experience. I know why it was formed. I know some of the people on the Siting Council. I've had no discussions with any of them. But I understand the procedure. And I'm troubled if we do not, as a body, have all of the information that we need to have in order to make that coherent, logical decision that's a tribute to all of us. And so in that context, lacking the clarity on the economics and the status of a DAS system, even though we know today that that technology is certainly not competitive with alternative technologies, which is why they want to build an antenna. Understanding the timing and the process relative to the Siting Council, having clear documentation of the health hazards on towers as well as DAS or any other alternative strategies, and having a basis for us in which we can compare those health hazards with other health hazards, I think is important for us to be informed. In that spirit, the most compelling argument that I've heard came from District 6, which is in support of the position that District 12 has taken. And that was that our kids are not given a choice where they go to school. The school is fixed in a location. Our kids have no choice. If they're going to public school, they're going to the public school that's, in most cases, closest to them. Private school's a different issue, but the entity is there, the infrastructure is there. As parents, whether we be old guys, young guys, or whatever, we have a choice as to where we live. And if you believe in caveat emptor, which I do, that we've got an obligation as a buyer of a house to make sure that we know what the risks are associated with that, whether it be cell towers or drainage or you name it. Given that, I'd simply like to ask the moderator a question for information purposes. Is it appropriate, Mr. Moderator, for this to be referred to the Board of Selectmen, who would be the vehicle through which the committee that the first selectman has appointed? Okay?
we can refer within the RTM.
So there has been discussion about indefinitely postponing. I'm not in favor of that. There's no place to refer this. And so as long as you are collectively comfortable tonight with taking a vote because you've got all the information
Mr. Porter,
that you
your
need,
time is up.
then I think we move forward with the vote. Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment to District 11. Is that Mr. Scher? Peter Scher? Mr. Berg, did you want to speak?
Good evening. Many of you may remember me. I was served in this body for 3 terms and was recently elected to the Board of Education in the town of Greenwich. But I rise tonight not representing the board's position, but my own position as a resident of the town, interested in the health and welfare of the more than 8,000 children that we have in public schools in the town of Greenwich, and the many thousands of more children that we have in nursery schools and other private schools within the town of Greenwich. I've seen great things in this body, as I said when I served here 3 terms. I think you have an opportunity to send a very clear message, a clean and clear message, joining with the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Connecticut, the delegation to Hartford, both our senator and 3 representatives, as well as the Board of Education on which I serve, that you do not want cellular towers located at or near accredited schools within the town of Greenwich. I very much also am interested in protecting open spaces, as I know many people in this body are, but you have an opportunity tonight to send a very clear and clean message, and I hope you'll vote for that and vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Peter Berg, District 8.
Evening again. So as I mentioned, in your explanos covers a 2-month period, May and June of 2009. Much has happened since, much happened before that date. Some things are yet to happen. So as I mentioned, in December, we did learn that the Pinetum is definitely in play. It has been offered to T-Mobile. T-Mobile has accepted, and there is a draft lease contract that exists. You did hear that the Board of Selectmen has proposed a cell tower task force that will be formed and will be meeting and will be taking up this matter. Just to clarify, Mr. Van Keyserling mentioned that the Land Use Committee met tonight. We did meet for the purposes of interviewing 3 candidates who could not make our meeting last week. We met at 7:30. There was no opportunity to take up other items. But I want to mention just a few things that happened in the past. In 1972, the town proposed to build, 1965, the town proposed to build the fire training tower on the identical site. The widow of the donor of this property wrote and objected to the fire training tower on land donated for open space and said that tower was in violation of his will. And First Selectman Lowell Weicker abandoned that plan for the fire tower and put it somewhere else. In 1972, the town proposed affordable housing for the identical site in the Pinetum, and the Montgomery's attorney, W. Arthur Campbell, wrote of that and of the tower proposal, quote, "Such a blatant violation of provisions and conditions laid down in Colonel Montgomery's will, it seems difficult to comprehend how they were ever given serious consideration. If they had been adopted, it's my belief that the net result would have been that the title to the entire Pinetum would revert to Colonel Montgomery's heirs. Both Mrs. Jennings, that's the widow, and I resent the intermittent necessity to defend such proposals. They at a minimum indicate ingratitude for Colonel Montgomery's magnificent gift. Moreover, we are extremely concerned as to what might happen at some future date when all of those who are familiar with Colonel Montgomery's intentions are no longer here to resist such proposals.
30 seconds.
My major aim in writing to you at this time is to conserve the property in the future. And I'll mention that the T-Mobile contract for the North Mianus site is dated June of 2006. So it's approaching its 4th anniversary. It's a 5-year contract. It's renewable, but it's a 5-year contract. T-Mobile has not filed an application with the Siting Council. T-Mobile seems to be pursuing some strategy for which we are all going to be the pawns, if you will. Thank you.
Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Land Use Committee motion to amend item 11 and proceed to poll your delegation. If you are in favor of deleting the 2 whereas clauses from the substitute resolution and adding an additional resolved clause that expresses a desire that telecommunication structures not be constructed within the Montgomery Pine Edom Park, you should vote in favor. If you are opposed to that amendment, you should vote no. Now, we will need to await the result of that vote before proceeding further, so I ask the district chairs to expedite the voting on this amendment.
All right, thanks.
All right. We can. There were individuals who signed up to speak in general on item 11, and we can continue with that while we're voting. So if anyone who I call upon wishes to await the result of the vote on the amendment, I will respect that and get back to you. So let us pick up with discussion on item 11 in general. Fred Camillo, our state representative.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, and guests. We were approached a while ago to submit some type of help, intervene in the cell tower siting proposal for North Mianus. What we did, the Greenwich delegation, is we submitted a bill that called, we were going to ask for 1,500 feet, which is the exact same thing that this resolution calls for. The reason why it is 750 at the state level as opposed to 1,500 was we consulted with legal counsel and also people who had some experience with the Siting Council. And we were told the farther you go in distance, the less of a chance you're going to get it raised for a public hearing, which is the first step. So we wanted to get the ball rolling there. And after going back and forth, we decided to take their advice and put the 750 number on it. And I'm pleased to say that that worked. We are going to get it raised for a public hearing in the next 7 to 10 days. At the same time, there's another bill. There is another bill that deals with the Siting Council, which I won't get into, but I will say briefly that the Greenwich delegation is working with people like Senator Meyer and Representative Heinrich to address the Siting Council. It is a very, we were told at the beginning, basically, for a lot of people up there to forget about it. You had a 1 in 96 chance of beating them. If you did beat them, they could take you to court, take the Siting Council to court and win. But through our working together up there and with District 12, who refused to take a foregone conclusion seriously, they really fought hard, and I think because of them, in large part, we're where we are at the State House. I'm not going to sit here and say that we have a good shot at, this bill or even the overturning the Siting Council's authority to a regional council. But I will say, from a foregone conclusion that nothing was going to happen, that right now there's an intense debate up there, and that's a good thing. So we are looking at a long-term solution, and this resolution here tonight, we wholeheartedly support. 15. I just wanted to clarify that the 750 and the 1500, we wanted the 1500, but the fact that we have it now for a public hearing is a good thing. That could always be amended. But I salute everybody in here and District 12 for bringing this forward. We will continue to work hard on this, and we'll be available for any questioning or thoughts you may have in the near future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let me just indicate that we do have approximately 18 individuals who had signed up, but if the experience on the amendment is of any practicality, I think everyone already knows that when you're called, you can simply say, I adopt the comments of prior speakers, and I think that might be much appreciated by the body. So we'll go forward with these. The next speaker is Loretta Nolan, to be followed by Jim O'Brien.
Good evening. My name is Loretta Nolan. I reside in District 8. My children graduated from North Miami School, and I am a homeowner. I wholeheartedly support the measure put forth by District 12. If we have to choose between children and open space, I choose children. I am uniquely qualified to express an opinion, as my father worked in the telecommunications industry, and he had incredible amount of exposure to electromagnetic fields. Unfortunately, he developed a brain tumor, and he died when he was 53 years old. My children never got to meet their grandfather. He worked at Goldman Sachs, and if he were an investment banker, he might be here tonight, but he was not. He was a telephone worker. From the time of his first headache till the time that he died was 9 months. We cannot expose our children, our neighbors, our beloved teachers at North Miami School, and anyone else that lives in the immediate vicinity of the proposed Durante Tower to electromagnetic fields, the light pollution that will be on in the evening every night, and there are homes immediately around this flagpole/tower, the noise pollution that will also result from this flagpole/tower, and from any other risks of the tower falling. As I mentioned, my children never got to meet their grandfather.
30 seconds.
Thank you. If you are not willing to accept the dangers of EMFs, then I hope that you will consider an alternate site to mitigate the potential liability that the town faces down the road from this tower. If one sleigh ride can cost the town $6 million, I can't imagine the potential litigation when young adults experiencing health problems in the future come forth if we sit on our hands and do nothing. Thank you.
Jim O'Brien, to be followed by Sean Aslan. Sean Aslan, to be followed by William Howland. William Howland, to be followed by Jim Boutel. Is Mr. Howland here? Mr. Boutel, to be followed by Peter Berg.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, as I spoke on the prior motion, I am all in favor of protecting school children. As I said in our District 8 meeting, we had representation from District 12 as well. I had sent an email to their chairman the next day raising one concern about their resolution, and I'd like to address that now by offering the following amendment. If you look at their resolved clause, the final language and the final line located in the town of Greenwich. When we do stuff like this, lawyers will find loopholes, and this is a loophole. we're talking about where potentially towers could be sited in Greenwich. I am as concerned for that student at school in Rybrook or Stamford or any of our neighboring communities that were we to erect a tower on King Street across from the school in Rybrook, be permissible under this sense of the meeting resolution. Why do we restrict this to accredited schools in Greenwich? We don't care about the students in Stamford or Rybrook or our neighboring communities? So for that reason, and to avoid another black eye for the town, I move to strike the final 5 words, I believe, located in the town of Greenwich, make that 6. And I make that as a motion, Mr. Moderator.
Is there a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded to amend item 11 by striking the words located in the town of Greenwich in the resolved clause of the substitute resolution. Let me see if we have the vote on the amendment first. All right, we do have the result of the vote on the Land Use Committee motion to amend by striking the whereas clauses and adding a second resolve. Those in favor, 27, opposed 155, abstaining 3. So that motion to amend has failed. So we are dealing with the District 12 substitute resolution, and there is now presently before us a motion to amend that substitute resolution. Discussion on Mr. Boutel's motion to amend item 11. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? If you are in favor of taking out those words, located in the town of Greenwich, you should vote yes. If you are opposed, you should vote no. While we are voting on Mr. Boutel's amendment, proposed amendment, we will continue. All right, Mr. Berg, to be followed by Janet DeLuca. All right, to be followed by Karen, whose last name begins with A. You're passing. To be followed by Mr. Sardone. Do you care to speak? Mr. Berg, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that the speaker before, Mr. Boutel, again made the argument that it's kids versus trees, and the entire point of the Land Use Committee was simply to say it doesn't need to be.
Mr. Berg, you are speaking on the district. Wait a minute.
On the district, on the resolution,
District 12,
right? Sure.
Because the Land Use Committee motion is no
Sure,
longer.
but I understand, and I'm not making that argument. I'm just pointing out that it just not it doesn't have to be either, and the villain here is T-Mobile.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sardone, you have an opportunity. I'll take that as a no. Christine Ragusa? No? John Hartwell? To be followed by Wayne Jervis?
I'll be very brief. Mr. Schulte, I also coach football in the Greenwich Youth Football League. Bank Raiders, by the way. I obviously support anything that protects our children, and I just support this resolution. However, I don't think it goes far enough because there are too many children living outside of 1,500 feet from a school. Therefore, I think our number one priority is to go with your commission, your committee, and to make the number one item on your committee substitutes or alternatives for cell towers. We know at least one exists. We know Mount Vernon has it. They do not have cell towers. That is where we should put all our energy and our direction, and to get cell towers obsolete in the town of Greenwich. Thank you.
Mr. Jervis, to be followed by Matt Armstrong.
Thank you, our team, for the opportunity to address you on item 11. I, again, want to express my concerns for the health of children in the town of Greenwich and in neighboring towns for that matter. I would like to point out that this amendment does not address, as it did in previous iterations, daycare centers. I think younger children would be even more vulnerable than accredited students of accredited schools. Secondly, I think that it's well documented that to the extent there are health risks, that they would apply to the elderly as a particularly vulnerable population. This bill, despite my repeated recommendations to the contrary, does not include a single reference to elderly living facilities. I think we all know or have relatives and friends and family who are elderly and might be susceptible to increased incidences of Alzheimer's, which are documented in the reports that have been provided by those who are advocates of item 11. Furthermore, I think that the bogey here that we're looking at, a distance of 1,500 feet, is wide of the mark. We have the real issue that we should be focusing on is not distances, it is exposure levels. Exposure levels are power over distance. So you could have, for example, a match, and you could be a foot away from it and not be at any risk. However, you could be 10 feet away from a bonfire and have much higher level exposure to the heat from the bonfire. So if you cannot encapsulate power relative to distance in your resolution or your item, your sense of the meeting resolution, then there could be unintended adverse consequences to the children who go to school in Greenwich. So until a resolution comes forward or a task force recommendation that can put serious time into analyzing these nuances, we run the risk of doing more harm than good and prejudicing the decisions or recommendations of a task force that could approach this issue more seriously, or with greater consideration, I should say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Matt Armstrong, to be followed by Meredith Furcado.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. My name is Matt Armstrong. I'm a former RTM member myself, District 8, and a 46-year Greenwich resident. I've got 2 teenage children that attend Greenwich Public Schools. I am also very much in favor of protecting children, and I'll be very brief because a lot of the points I wanted to make have already been made. But in support of Mr. Tessie's comments earlier, I think this really deserves a task force committee so that all of these issues can be evaluated properly. I don't necessarily think drawing circles around schools is the way to make this decision, in as much as I'm in support of protecting our children. I think there are a lot of other determinators that need to be taken into consideration, and I think one of the unintended consequences of just looking at 1,500 feet is that we might in some instances end up with 2 towers where we would have originally only needed 1, and is that a better solution? So I think a task force on this is the way to go, and again, I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Meredith Furcado. Thank you. Connie Williamson. Is Connie Williamson here? Further discussion on item 11. All right, let's get the result of the pending Boutel amendment. All right, we have the result of the vote on Mr. Boutel's motion to delete the words "located in the town of Greenwich." Those in favor, 74, opposed, 84, abstaining 2. That motion to amend has failed. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item 11. And proceed to poll your delegation. While we are voting, we will continue with our next item, which is item 14. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
This is item 14. It's a substitute resolution in that we have changed some wording.
I would ask our members to please give attention to our speakers. We can conduct the vote quietly. Mr. Wells.
This is a substitute resolution, item 14. Resolve that section VA4 of the rules of the representative town meeting be amended by deleting the existing VA4 in its entirety and inserting in its place the following: for attendance of delegates. Each delegate to a committee shall be responsible for representing his district at the committee meetings. In the event the delegate is unable to attend, he should confirm that his alternate will attend, and if the alternate is not able to attend, and here's where the substitute is, delete the words work with and insert in its place assist, so that it reads, if the alternate is not able to attend, assist the district chairman to find a substitute to represent the district.
All right. So you are offering that is a substitute resolution?
Yes, sir.
On behalf of the committee?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That is now presently before us. May we have your report?
This is a matter that came to us by way of the special committee. The matter was postponed with many other items back in October. The Legislative and Rules Committee decided to bring it back in its present form. The history of this is that the special committee and also the Legislative and Rules Committee believes that we're better served by getting rid of the penalty provisions of delegates' failure to show up for at least 50% of the meetings and the requirement that there be an effort on the part of the district to vote them back on. We think it's more important to have district representation at the meetings so that the districts can be informed of what happens at the committee meetings. So we don't care whether delegates show up, we don't care whether alternates show up, we just want a delegate there to report back, and that's the purpose of the change in our rules. Our vote as amended was 11-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 14. Jenny Kroeb, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, and guests, my name is Jenny Kroeb. I'm from District 8, and I'm speaking against item 14. Item 14 proposes to eliminate the current committee meeting attendance requirement for RTM committee delegates. Right now, that attendance requirement is set at an already modest minimum of 50% of committee meetings. The rationale provided for the proposed change is that Legislative and Rules Committee believes a delegate's main responsibility is to report back to his district, and therefore the focus of the rule should be to ensure district representation. However, rewriting the attendance rule in this way would be redundant, since a district representation requirement is already addressed elsewhere in the RTM rules. The purpose of the committee attendance requirement is to communicate a minimum performance standard for committee delegates. The RTM rules emphasize that RTM committees are the most important bodies affecting the work agenda of the RTM, and committee involvement is a serious responsibility. Committees analyze the call items and recommend amendments, referrals, or postponements. This is an active role that goes well beyond the passive reporting function described in the explanos for this item. I think we would all agree that the RTM functions best with committed and engaged committee delegates. Since there are 230 district seats but fewer than 150 available delegate positions for committees, more than a third of the RTM membership serve only as alternates. Just one of our districts has enough delegate assignments for all of its members. In our largest district, there are enough members to fill the delegate positions twice over. Yet the proposed rule change would allow a committee delegate to retain delegate status for the term without even minimal attendance at committee meetings. I believe the proposed change signals a lowering of standards for RTM committee work and will reflect poorly on this body. It also sends an unfortunate signal to the RTM members who currently serve only as committee alternates. I hope you will join me in voting it down. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 14? Paul Curtis, to be followed by Dr. Carlson.
Dr. Carlson was...
Dr. Carlson, District 1.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, I didn't expect to speak tonight, but I'd like to speak in favor of this motion. I, like you, I think I'm quite tired this evening. But what we have in some of the smaller districts is sometimes we have an older member who gets sick. And sometimes that member has made good contributions for many years and has been on a committee for a long time and has done very well there. But they just turn up and they get sick. Some of the districts I've noticed are smaller than District 1. And I think there are problems of getting people to committees. What we want is exactly what Mr. Wells said, is to have people go to these committees and make reports. As vice chairman for many years in District 1, I've had to take many a person's place in many a committee meeting. We try in District 1, and I assume many other districts the same, to do a good job for the RTM and for the people of Greenwich. A little bit of relaxation on the toughness of this, I think, will be especially helpful for some of the smaller districts and for some of the districts that have a disproportionate number of elderly members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Curtis.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be very brief. It's very late. I would request that you vote this down. I think the intent of removing some of the hard penalties is a good idea. I don't think this is the correct way to do it by relaxing everything. We need to keep our committees active, and we need to keep our alternates and delegates there. I'm a little concerned about kind of an open substitution clause. Maybe these people shouldn't vote. I really think we need to take a better look at this. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 14. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 14, and proceed to poll your delegation. The final item on our agenda now comes before us, item 24. David Tice, our selectman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen, reappointed, a member of the Board of Ethics for a term expiring 3/31/13, Jane Finn.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 24 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of our committees? Dr. Delman with the Town Services Committee report.
Good evening. The candidate was unable to meet with us on Tuesday night. We made a motion to postpone, and at the appropriate time, I will give such a motion.
Thank you. Mr. Von Keyserling with the Appointments Committee report. You also want to postpone this? This is Jane Finn, item 24. Thank you. Dr. Delman?
On behalf of Town Services, we make a motion to postpone. We did not put a date in, so I will make an amendment to the April meeting.
All right. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to postpone item 24 to our April meeting. I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion to postpone has carried. We have two pending votes, and as soon as we get the tally, we will then proceed to adjourn the meeting. While we are waiting, I would like to thank all of those involved in the effort to get to you tonight the RTM directory. And there are many people who are involved. Of course, we are very grateful to the League of Women Voters, who pulls this together. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Bergweger of District 8, his wife is a prime. Kathy Bergweger is the main person within the league who helps pull this together. Of course, we know Joan Caldwell took a leading effort to compile all of our contact information. And last but not least, Rick Crowell, whose financial support makes it possible. So thank you very much to all for that effort. All right, I do have the result of the vote on item 11. This was the sense of the meeting resolution regarding cell towers. Those in favor, 124. Opposed, 29. Abstaining, 13. That item has carried. I ask that our districts expedite the one remaining vote on item 14. All right, we have the result of the vote on item 14, which was the rule change regarding attendance of delegates at committee meetings. Those in favor, 76. Opposed, 78. Abstaining, 1. That item has failed. There being no further business to come before the meeting, and absent objection, this meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming, and have a safe trip home.